Welcome to a Lover and a Fighter podcast, a special edition from the UFC APEX, and now with video. I am the fighter. I'm Dean Thomas. You know me from Dana White Looking for a Fight. You know me from the Dean Diaries. I'll be on the desk on the UFC pre and the post show, and you might see me pop up in all kind of places that I ain't supposed to be, like the Syracuse basketball game, sitting behind Jalen Hurts. The lover, Brother Love, a.k.a. J to the C, Josh Cohen from Josh Cohen and the home team on ESPN West Palm. He couldn't make the trip all the way out here to Vegas, so today you are stuck with me, and what a perfect day to debut video with this boyishly charming structure of a face. So JC, you will be missed, but the video debut must go on. And all the Twitter fans that I so despise of. We got to keep it moving, y'all. Or who else y'all going to hate on? So here we go. Over the weekend, we saw Islam Makhachev take on Alexander Volkanovski for the UFC lightweight title in Alexander's home country of Australia. Many people are calling this one a fight for the ages, and rightfully so. This fight had a little bit of everything. This fight had something for everyone, something that everyone could appreciate, from the casual fan to the nerdiest of nerds like myself. It had great action, it had great technique, and without disappointment, it had controversy. Now, depending on your bias, you go into the fight thinking who you thought was going to win, that's probably who you had winning the fight. And if not, depending on how you score fights based on an MMA contest or an actual fight, that's probably how you determined who the winner of that fight was. Now, if you look at it from an MMA contest perspective, Islam probably won that fight. But if you look at it from a fight perspective, you could make an argument. I could make an argument that Alexander Volkanovski won that fight. Now, the way I saw it was that Alexander showed that he was probably the better fighter, but he uncharacteristically made some mistakes that cost him the fight. And those mistakes were emotional. He allowed himself to get hit too many times, and he allowed himself to get stuck in positions because of his emotions got a little bit away from him. And a guy as brilliant, a fighter as brilliant as Islam Makhachev was able to capitalize off him. Now, for my part, I need to go back and watch it again. Or maybe I don't, because I probably won't. But some people watch fights to be entertained. I watch fights primarily looking at technique and tactics. But MMA pays 3 judges to watch the fight with the sole purpose of determining a winner. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the opinion of those 3 judges, whose only job is to keep score of who they think is winning the fight. So before I make judgment, and maybe before you make judgment, perhaps you should watch the fight, removing your bias, and only focus on the criteria. And then you can render a decision as to who you think won the fight. But for now, Islam will remain the lightweight champion of the world. One of the bigger storylines of the entire night was Islam and the Alexander fight comes in the aftermath. Dan Hooker, former opponent of Islam Makhachev and teammate of Alexander Volkanovski, has called Islam a cheating dog. And he is accusing him of using an IV to rehydrate after the weight cut. Now, back in the day, IVs were legal. Most fighters used them. It allowed fighters to cut an enormous amount of weight and be able to rehydrate properly. Now, IVs became banned, and there was outrage. Weight cutters claimed it was an attack against them, and they claimed that it was more of a risk of injury for them if they couldn't rehydrate properly. Now, I haven't seen much of that, but perhaps it was just a deterrent to keep heavy weight cutters from cutting a lot of weight. But either way, it was banned, and you really didn't hear much about it. And as time went on, you kind of forgot about it. Now, there were a couple guys who got popped for it, but either way, the MMA world forgot about these weight cutting issues in terms of rehydrating with IVs until now. And this is all very peculiar to me. And it's not that I don't believe Dan Hooker. Because why would he come out and say something like this without concrete proof? And the fact that he did is troubling. It's a bit foul, and it's a bad look. You need proof, Dan Hooker. It's like Denzel Washington said, it's what you can prove. And Dan Hooker, it's what you can prove. The reality is that I couldn't believe that Islam would use an IV to rehydrate. I can believe that. I can believe that he would deny it. Because why would you admit that if it's illegal? But that's all the more reason why Dan Hooker should have had proof. You got to have pictures. You got to have video. You got to have the nurse come out and tell everybody what she did. But you had none of that. So for now, Dan Hooker, I'm sorry. It looks petty. And speaking of Dan Hooker, he had to pull out of his fight against the tarantula Jalen Turner at UFC 285 due to a hand injury. Now, Jalen Turner, to me, is one of the more promising fighters in the UFC today. He's got the height, he's got the reach, he's got the competitive spirit and the skill. All that he was lacking, really, was a ranked or a named opponent. Now, losing Dan Hooker as an opponent would have been detrimental to this young man's progress as a fighter. But the UFC said, not to worry. And we got something for you. We got him a man with name value. They got him someone of higher ranking. They got him Mateusz Gamrot. This will undoubtedly be a much more difficult task for Jalen. But a win over Gamrot will put him in the conversation for title contenders. In the UFC's hottest division, with so much going on right now between Islam and Alexander, then there's Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier, Beneil Dariush. Jalen Turner has the opportunity to be amongst good company. And I'm happy for him for that reason. He gets an opportunity. So today, on the debut of the video version of the Lover and the Fighter podcast, I am going to cut it short, and we will return next week with my partner, Josh Cohen. So on behalf of myself, Dean Thomas, and Josh Cohen, I am out. Thank you for joining. Peace.